Hi everyone, my name is Kartik and my channel is about mental models. Welcome to my third video in this cognitive bias mini-series. In this video I will be talking about the availability bias, also known as the availability heuristic. The availability bias refers to the tendency to rely or use the information we can recall quickly and easily. In other words, we are being biased towards the information we can quickly and easily recall. So using this bias, we deem the information that we can quickly and easily recall to be the most valid, and we ignore alternative solutions or opinions, even though the information we are relying on, the information that we can quickly and easily recall, even if that is not the best representation of the topic or idea. Simply put, if we can recall it, then it must be important. If we can't remember it, then it must be less important, and that's what's going on in our minds. A really simple example, let's just say example one. Let's say you want to buy something and you are trying to decide which shop to go to. If your decision is based on the first shop that you think of, because it's the most easily recalled or quickly recalled, then that is an example of availability bias. So this was the first shop. Let's take another example. Example 2. Let's say you went to eat at a restaurant after a long time. So here's my restaurant. And I went there a long time ago to eat. And although you can't remember the food you had, you can easily remember the name, and you can easily recall that after you'd eaten at the restaurant, you had a stomachache. And so you can recall these two things. You can recall the name of the restaurant and the fact that you had an upset stomach after visiting. And if based on that recollection alone you decide not to go to the restaurant based on this recollection and the fact that you know the name, then this is another example of availability bias. Let me take a more involved example. Let's say it's February 2018 and in February 2018 you hear about an airline incident in which 71 people die. So you hear about an airline incident. This is my aeroplane, my cockpit, and we hear 71 people die. Now, in the the same month, let's say, so that's the first thing you hear in February. Let's say, again in the same month, in the month of February 2018, you hear another airline incident in another part of the world, so unconnected to the first one, in which 66 people die. So these two things are sort of front and center of your mind. If we sort of fast forward a bit down the timeline, and let's say now we're in January 2019, and you read an article that says the number of airline deaths in 2018 was 500 deaths in 2018. So you read that, and that's sort of at the front and center. And it's also in the article mentioned that this was sharply up from 2017, in which there were 13 deaths from airline accidents. So based on this information, you've got these three pieces of information. You may think, based on those, that aeroplane travel is unsafe, and you may even be scared of flying. And that's because you've got something to go on. You can easily recall this information based on its recency. It's very recent. We're only in sort of January 2019. All of these items that you've heard of happened in February 2018, and you've happened to read an article. But what you may less easily recall is that statistically, in 2018, there was only one fatal accident for every 3 million flights. One fatal accident for 3 million flights. What you may also not easily recall is in Great Britain alone, so we'll go up here, in GB alone, the deaths from road traffic accidents, so here's my car, in 2018 there were 1,782 people died from road traffic accidents. And in 2017, so this is the 2018 number, in 2017 that number was broadly the same, 1,793. So based on these other facts, and these numbers here are sort of worldwide, and this number here, these are just Great Britain numbers. Based on all of these facts, now you can say comparatively, therefore, the chance of dying in a car accident is far higher than dying on an aeroplane, one fatal accident for 3 million flights. And therefore, thinking just on this information here that you had at the front and center of your mind, thinking just based on that, thinking that aeroplane travel is unsafe on those few snippets of information that you can easily recall, you can see that the decision you've got to is not entirely true. I just want to add one small point to this, and that is that the number of people who died in 2022 so last year, from road traffic accidents was reported to be 1,695. So as you can see, the trend in road traffic accidents is also reducing. So you may think that, oh, nearly 1,800 people have died, but as time has gone on, that number has fallen. And if you look at historic numbers going back into sort of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the numbers are much, much higher. So that is also a reducing trend in itself as well. So that's a reducing trend, and this is safer. But you wouldn't think that just by looking at, I suppose, this piece of information for airlines and just these two pieces of information for cars. So, how do we overcome this bias? Well, firstly, we need to consciously stop and go through relevant information. So we need to stop and review information. So maybe do a bit of research. Probably a good way of putting it. This means that, and by doing this means that we shouldn't assume that whatever comes into our mind first is necessarily correct. Number two, when making a decision, try and delay and take time before making the decision so that you can consider alternatives. Number three is to keep a log or track of information. So as we are more likely to remember something significant, whether it is positive or negative, we may miss out on other important information which isn't a significant event. It's kind of like a run-of-the-mill, happens all the time. But these points and these pieces of information that are less significant, these events that are less significant, are also important, or equally important, probably even more important, but we can't necessarily easily remember them because they're not significant. So we need to keep a log or a track of this information. And from time to time, following on from that, we need to go back and revisit this old information so that it can be recalled more easily. Number five, we need to focus on trends and patterns. Sort of ties in with my example here about the cars. Similar to, again, point three, significant events, trends and patterns are very important because outlier events can also be more memorable, just like significant events. But the trend, which is not based on outlier events, it's based on more sort of events that happen in the course of time. Outlier events tend to be more memorable, but events that happen within sort of normal course of business, as it were, are less likely to be remembered, but are more likely to be reflective of the truth. And so focusing on trends and patterns, and the longer the better, you get a more informed decision at the end of it. And so by using these techniques, and there are probably others, you can broaden your perspective to make sure your perspective isn't becoming distorted, which can ultimately lead to more accurate decision making. And this is the availability bias, and that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. and I will see you in the next video with another cognitive bias video. Thank you. Bye bye.